Hey guys, Joshua Gibson here with the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. This is episode 23, and I'm joined once again by Seb Ostrowicz from the Weightlifting House. Seb, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm very excited. Oh, I'm very happy to see that you got my name completely right this time. Last time I was on, there's a little bit of ambiguity with how to pronounce my last name, but that was spot on. So I'm very pleased to be back.
I think if there's anything I've learned from pronouncing words that I look at and kind of can't understand, it's you just have to be confident and go with it. You can't
That's
doubt
what I do
yourself.
every week on the news show. Yeah, absolutely. You pick a name, you go with it. You assume that most people don't know how it's supposed to sound. So if you make it sound like you know, then you convince 99% of the people that that's just how it is.
Right. And Seb, before we kind of hop on into the discussion, I just want you to let the listeners know what you've been up to and maybe how Weightlifting House is coming along.
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, so I mean, things have been growing quite a lot recently. I sold a lot of t-shirts. I've had a lot of demand for people just for a normal, simply like Weightlifting House branded t-shirt, which I've ordered in and I will start selling in a week or so. But I guess the main thing is some of you guys listening might have heard this. Josh, I know you know about this, but I'm bringing out the Weightlifting House barbell. So those have been ordered. They're being manufactured at the moment, and then they'll arrive in the UK and in the US kind of towards the end of April and will be ready to sell then. So that's the thing that I'm like most excited about at the moment, along with my own coaching and training, is the fact that I'm going to be kind of entering this barbell business, and who knows, maybe I'll make something out of it, or who knows, maybe I won't. But it's a fun thing to do while I'm still young, so I figured I might as well give it a go.
Right. And touching on those t-shirts, you were taking over Instagram. I see tons of lifters that I follow just randomly wearing the YB Normal t-shirt.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I started I wrote a little note saying, thank you for buying this t-shirt. Now that you're wearing it, channel your inner Gardev and snatch 180 kilos. Oh, and by the way, hashtag weightlifting house, or tag me in your post if you wear it. And I did that for like the first 100, so that everyone who got them, as soon as they got their t-shirt and they wore it, they would tag me. And I think that started the ball kind of rolling with that. So that worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah, and a person that I don't know if you follow, but his name's Marcus. He trains at Average Bros. He's like a 77.
Yeah, oh, he's amazing.
Oh, he's super strong. Incredible. He was wearing that t-shirt, and that's
unreal.
kind of why I thought of that.
Is he wearing that t-shirt?
Yeah, he's wearing it. He clean and jerked like 180 in that t-shirt.
Oh, damn, I didn't realize that. I need to message him.
Yeah, it's sick, man.
I need to message him and get him on the podcast. Damn. You know, speaking of bros, I know we're already like off topic somehow, but Angelo Bianco, the other bros 77, as far as I know, has deleted his Instagram account, which often when that happens, there's something bad has happened with some kind of test. I don't want to speculate, but I had a bunch of people message and be like, maybe Angelo's been popped or something like that. So I thought I'd bring that to your attention.
That's really fascinating. That's really fascinating.
Hopefully not. I mean, Bros' gym has had a history of it, I guess, with some of his best athletes, but who knows? Who knows? It's just speculation until we know.
Well, the question is, if a coach has a history of athletes getting popped, do you feel like there's ever going to be a change in their protocols? Or do you think they're just going to try and keep hammering away?
As in a change in the coaches' protocols?
Like the doping protocols they use. Do you think he'll ever actually get away from that?
I was talking to Phil Andrews, the head of USA Weightlifting, CEO, I don't know what his actual title is, and he was saying that because he's so involved in the board of the IWF at the moment that he's able to see how the kinds of measures that some countries are going to, and he's quite stern to the fact that if you're an athlete who has been popped a few times, he doesn't want you back in the sport. Mm-hmm. Like I brought up Ilya coming back, and he was very judgmental of Ilya, but he said he's also very open to a lot of the countries who have been caught multiple times recently to keep staying in the sport as long as they take a genuine make a genuine action to change. And he said that he thinks that is happening. He thinks that the testing is far better. I mean, he was even talking about how to qualify for the Olympics now, you have to enter 6 international competitions. And just by doing that, it means that you're going to be tested more often. you're going to be competing more often, so you're not able to go on and off drugs as much, and there's going to be more testing. So, I mean, little things like that are kind of, I guess, maybe pulling us away from the drugged sport, but at the end of the day, the all-time world record snatch, heaviest snatch ever, only happened a few months ago, so whether or not it's actually going to work, I'm not sure, but who knows?
What are your thoughts on Ilya coming back into weightlifting?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's like, I spoke with you off air like a week ago maybe about this, and the thing I'm seeing is it's almost like someone murders someone, and then a year later they murder someone else, and the authorities only convict him for one murder because they didn't tell him in between that he'd done something wrong. That's kind of how it seems, and so I went down pretty hard on the IWF. I thought they were kind of giving in to pressure. I mean, I'm biased because like part of me does want to see Ilya compete again, but part of me knows that it's probably a bad decision to let him back for the sport itself. But Phil Andrews was saying that the IWF literally had no choice. Like the rules were up until that point that if you hadn't been told within a certain period, then you could get caught again or something, or you couldn't get caught again. So I don't know. I think they're going to change that rule so it doesn't happen again, because we've seen like some guys have been popped once and they're banned for 4 years, and Ilya's been popped twice and he's only banned for 2 years. So like there's a lot of inconsistency, but rules have been changing, which is where those inconsistencies stem from, I guess.
Now, do you have any predictions for his return? Do you think he's going to be as high of a level as he was before?
I would. It's funny because like if I say that I would like him to, then I'm basically admitting that I want him to dope. So I want to see him hit astronomical weights, but I want him to be clean, but I also want him to win. So I don't know. I think probably he'll go in as a 94. I don't think he'll go back up to 105, because when he was a 105, he was clearly on a lot of drugs to gain that kind of weight, because he was only like 5'7" or something. So I think he'll still win because he doesn't know anything but winning. He's never been beaten. Like that was the amazing thing about Ilya, is he's never lost internationally from the age of 17 until he was popped. And it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting. Like his rival Aram now, who was, he stopped training a while back. He's back as well and isn't obviously on drugs at all or anything like that. And he's a current snatch world record holder. So I think maybe a lot of these guys will come back off drugs, or certainly on much lower doses, and it might become a more fair sport, but we'll have to wait and see.
So Aram now snatched 200. Do you know what he's snatching now in his return?
I think he did 170 off the blocks. I think he might have doubled 160. So like these are pretty believable numbers to do clean. I mean, he's essentially one of the best snatchers of the last 10 or 15 years. And so if you imagine now he's a clean 105, and he's only snatching 170. I mean, Wes Kitts snatched 180, and I assume most people, or at least a lot of people, think that he's clean. So if Wes is doing 180 and Aram now is at 170 after 6 months of training, I think it's fairly reasonable to believe that he could be clean and that he could get up over 180 after a few years, because he's a more talented athlete than Wes Kitts is.
Okay. I would be really interested to see Ilya's training in his return versus his training when he was on a lot of drugs. I wonder if there's going to be any similarities there. No.
Yeah, did I tell you that I'm going to go out to Kazakhstan in a month minus 1 day? I don't know when this is being aired. I'm going out on the 24th of March. And I messaged Ilya and I said, I'm coming out. I want to film you. I want to do a podcast. Let's get loads of footage and stuff. And I messaged him in Russian because I had someone translate it for me. And he replied and he was like, yes, this sounds amazing. I'd love to do it, all in Russian. So then I got a message translated back saying, just to let you know, I'm English. I don't speak Russian. I got the message translated, and then silence for like a week. He'd been replying like immediately. As soon as he found out I was English and couldn't speak Russian, there was nothing. I messaged him again, and then he got back to me and he said, yeah, we'll try and sort something. I'll call you nearer the time. And
wow.
Hopefully, I think his English is pretty good now, so I think it'd be possible, but if that goes ahead, like I'm definitely going to be in Kazakhstan for the week. So if I can spend some time with him, that will make my life have meaning.
Yeah, please tell me.
And it'll be huge for weightlifting Weightlifting House,
Please tell me you picked up a quality camera to record all of this on, so we can get Ilya in HD.
Yeah, I haven't, but I will. I promise you that. I will spend whatever money I have to get a good camera. And I'll recommend that he comes on this podcast because, he has to.
That's awesome, man. That's going to be such an amazing moment when you meet him for the first time and watch him train in person.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's just an amazing. I mean, on drugs or off, I like to blame. I mean, I don't think he's a bad guy for going on drugs. I think it's a product of the country that he's in. If you're going to be in Kazakhstan, that's just how it's done. I don't think he necessarily said, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do this on my own. They're given to him from a young age. That's just a system he's brought up in, whether that's good or bad. But just being able to see him and his mentality and watch him train and how perfect he moves. Glenn gets shit on a lot whenever Glenn talks about Ilya. He always gets emails and messages saying, how dare you talk about this drug cheat? But we're still allowed to talk about how nicely he lifts,
Yeah. Now, while we're on the topic of elite athletes, we did want to talk a bit about training and programming. So kind of we did. Kind of the topic we had that was going to kind of lead to the subtopics that we have is how do you go about planning an extended period of training? I think this is an important question because a lot of people consider periodization. Some people think periodization isn't necessary depending on your skill level. So my question is to you, if you were to develop a macro cycle or an annual plan for an athlete, what goes through your head when you're considering the necessity of that? I mean, if you even need to do it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the whole point there is whether I need to do it. Like, it depends on the athlete. If I have a guy or a girl who's been lifting for a year or less, or maybe even less than 2 years, I probably wouldn't even worry about anything close to a year-long cycle. Mm-hmm. Like, they can pretty much, at least within the first year, almost repeat the same week or even month over and over again, just increasing the weight and maybe starting to increase load and volume. But I mean, they can do such a basic amount of periodization or almost no periodization at all. Mm-hmm. And then I guess when you look at the top athletes, some of the best literature we have on that is from the Russian training manuals from the 60s and 70s. And in that, they do have incredibly comprehensive in detailed 4-year program, because obviously everything is based around the 4-year quad. But at the same time, that was written for drugged athletes who trained a different way the way that we do. So I don't know if there's any particularly amazing literature that we can take and copy, program or rep for rep. But for me, I guess it would start with the quality of the weightlifter. If suddenly someone said to me, you were in charge of Ian Wilson's training for a year, I would start planning at least roughly how that year is going to look. Mm-hmm. If I was given someone within the first year of training, I would consider nothing more than the next week of training for them. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it.
No, that's a great question. I think it really boils down to, like you said, experience level and the number of competitions and the importance of those competitions. So Ian Wilson, if he's going to compete internationally, those have to be prepared for. You have to have different preparatory phases leading up. Whereas a beginner that competes every weekend or once every few weeks, it's a heavy day. That's really all it is. I mean, there's nothing on the line. There's no points for an Olympic spot. There are no important medals or sponsorships or anything like that. So with that being said, I think that annual plans require a bit of inflexibility, and I personally like flexibility in training. So I tend to almost take a reverse approach and start from like a weekly plan and work up to a yearly plan, whereas like a lot of people will do the reverse. I don't know if you've ever kind of looked at it. When you program for an athlete, how do you go about writing it out? Do you start with the week? Do you start with the month? Maybe you could take us through like an example program.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually good because I literally just this morning I got up and I did the Penn Leward stuff and then I programmed for 3 or 4 athletes of my own. So I open up an Excel spreadsheet. I write the days of the week that they're going to train. And then this is something that I spoke with Max Ater about, because I'd heard him say it a few years ago, and it took me a while to understand what he was saying. But he said to me that a lot of people, the first thing they choose is the exercise, whereas that would be the last thing that he would choose. And that made no sense to me, because I thought the exercise was the most important thing. And it took me a while, and I realized on my own, by myself, and then I spoke to him about it. He confirmed that I was right in what I understood of it, was that you look at what the person needs to improve on, and then you choose or you select exercises that fit that need. So, not everyone needs to do deficit deadlifts. But so you don't just think, okay, this is a program, it's going to have deficit deadlifts, I'll put them in on a Tuesday. You look at what the athlete needs. If the athlete has weak legs off the floor and their hips shoot up, then you look at that as a problem as itself, and how can I improve that? And you might think, okay, we'll do some pulls to the knee with a pause, or we'll do some deficit cleans, or we'll just improve overall leg strength with a front squat or a back squat. You don't just select these arbitrary exercises. Just because you're a weightlifter doesn't mean you have to back squat. If someone who squats 300 kilos and snatches 100 turns up, I probably won't give them any back squats, even though they're a weightlifter. You look at what that person needs, which isn't leg strength. It's technique. And you just pick, does this person need speed, position work, rhythm work, strength in the hamstrings or the back, or whatever it is. And then you accelerate the improvement, the rate of improvement of that one quality as much as you can in a training plan. So that's what I do now, is I'll get my athlete and I'll write down bar path off the hips, and I'll write down rotation of the shoulders, and I'll write down keeping the knees forward in the squat. And those are the three things that athlete needs to work on. And I'll write down some exercises in that column that will fix each of those things, and I put them into the program. And then I think about adding the other things that we're definitely going to need. And from there, like I'm sure you do the same, I'll then periodize it, and I'll have, if we're early on in the program, the weight is going to be a little bit lighter, at least in the sort of squats and that kind of area of things. And the volume is going to be high. And then as we progress, the weight comes up a bit and the volume goes down. But as I've learned from Glenn, and as I'm sure you've learned from Glenn, such huge periodizations from 10s to 1s is not really needed for a lot of athletes.
Right. So you made a lot of great points, and kind of a question I have. You brought up the example of someone that squats a lot but doesn't snatch a lot.
Yeah.
With something like that, would you always keep a small thread of maybe like a back squat in there just to maintain that quality? Or could you remove it completely? And then how long would you keep it removed from a program?
I mean, I've never had an athlete that I wouldn't give squats to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had a guy who turned up who was probably going to listen to this, called Ed, who back squat 200 kilos and only snatched like 90. And I wrote a program for him, and I did keep him back squats, even though his back squat is ridiculously high compared to his snatch and his clean. Like, he didn't need really to get much stronger legs, but he's only 19. He could be stronger, and he's so athletic that I know his snatch and clean and jerk are going to catch up soon. Like, he's already, since then, he cleaned 140 for a set of 5 last week. Wow. After weightlifting for like 6 months.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
So he yeah, I know. I mean, he did do rugby and CrossFit before, so he was an athlete. But I think if you have an athlete, let's just pick someone who squats 300 and snatches 100. Their squat could probably come down to 200 kilos, and their technique could improve in the snatch, and they would still snatch more. Mm-hmm. Like they could still get their snatch up to 120, even if their squat lost 100 kilos. So I wouldn't try and get the athletes to lose their squats, but I would barely program squats, because the amount of work that they're going to have to do to improve from 300 is going to take up so much of their recoverable volume that they're not going to be able to dedicate any of their time to the thing that they need to, which is technique in the snatch. So I'd program as much technique in the snatch work as we could, or whatever, bring up whatever qualities are lagging. And then if there's any volume left, then yeah, I'll give them, 3 triples in the squat once or twice a week, just to maintain their squatting or whatever. But I wouldn't give them 3 sets of 10, 12 weeks out. Like, that's just a ridiculous thing to do, because like, what is 3 sets in the 10 the squat going to do to that? It's going to ruin them to start with. And all that volume could be put into snatch clean and jerk.
Right. So kind of flipping that question around, if we had somebody that, say, has a problem keeping the bar coming in off the floor, so you program in like a pause off the floor. Now, how long would you keep that variation in to kind of have them perform the technique correctly? And do you feel like there's ever a point where you would pull it out? Because like I've talked to Will Fleming, and he says that he uses exercise to replace cues. And that's almost an exercise that replaces a cue. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
I just love what Will Fleming said. I hadn't heard that, but I love it. I just wrote an article, and it was called Strength Beyond Cues. And it was basically coming down to what I wrote about essentially was you always hear people yelling chest or chest up or whatever. And we know what that means, but it gets to a point where it doesn't matter how much you yell it or how loudly you yell it, the athlete can no longer keep their chest up. So you've got to look beyond what that is. And why can't the athlete keep their chest up? Well, if an athlete's chest is dropping, it means that the hips are coming up a foot, but the bar's only coming off the floor half a foot. So all of the increase in the hip isn't transferring into the increase in height in the bar. So you just work out, okay, that must mean the person has weak legs. So then you program to improve that with, like you're saying, maybe a pause or some back squats or something like that. And so I agree massively with what Will Fleming was saying there, where a lot of the time when you yell out cues, really you just need to program better. Like yelling at an athlete to pull the bar back. Like, it's not like the athlete doesn't understand what you're saying or they just keep forgetting. They just can't do it. So I add an exercise in. Like I got a girl called Barry, and I'm giving her no contact snatches every Monday at the moment because she hits the bar out and she makes contact. And I'm going to periodize that over 4 weeks with going from 70% week 1 to 75 to 80 to 85% week 4. Coming up from I think we're starting off at 5 triples and we'll end up at 4 doubles. So the volume's going to have gone from 15 reps to 8 reps, which is basically a 50% loss in volume. But the weight will have gone up 15%. And I'll keep that in for 4 weeks at a minimum. And if it just seems to continually help with her technique, I would never take it out. If it gets to a point where her bar path is great, then I'll take it out. I mean, if it's a week of a competition, I probably wouldn't put it in. But if it's always a problem for her, but whenever she does this one exercise, she does a lot better, then I would never take it out because I don't see a reason to. Until it stops working, I wouldn't take it out.
So something I've kind of gotten away from, or at least kind of changed my view on, is specificity when someone's peaking for a meet. So a lot of people are under the assumption that you need to be highly specific, do the competition movement, and only the competition movement. But my question is, why not use variation if it's going to help someone move more efficiently and move correctly? Because it's not like they're going to confuse a pause with a full snatch or confuse a no contact with a full snatch. And it does help undulate the weight, so you're not always going heavy and killing yourself. So I think people become so obsessed with this idea of specificity. But like you were saying, you would pull it out. So, I mean, how would you peak someone for a meet? And do you think it is important to keep it specific to the competition lifts 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 1 week out? When would you make that change?
I am going to make it more specific, like a week out. So if you look at the snatch, something that is not very specific to the snatch that might be worthwhile a couple months out or 3 months out is 10 reps in the back squat. That's not specific to the snatch almost at all, but it is something that's going to improve other qualities that the lifter needs, which we can then use to improve the base, and then there'll be a bigger peak on the pyramid or whatever. So I'm not going to put 10 rep max back squats in the week of competition because that isn't specific enough. And I know that when you say specificity, you're not looking that far away from the 1 rep max snatch, but with things like with sets of 3 or pauses, or I probably would get rid of pauses the week out of a competition. And to be honest, the week of competitions, I only put in terms of the actual lifts, I only put in snatches and clean and jerks, maybe powers. But I'll keep in pulls, I'll keep in front squats. I even like to keep in glute hams or pull-ups. And the reason is, whenever you watch videos of training halls of major competitions, the best athletes there are doing hip extensions a few days out. They're doing pull-ups. They're doing weighted sit-ups. They're doing weighted press-ups. They're doing like a lot of variation. Well, they're doing a lot of small exercises for relatively high volume. They're not squatting set to 5 heavy. They'll do lower volume in the squats and the snatch and clean and jerk, but they'll do a set of 10 press-ups, or they'll do a set of 10 hip extensions, and they'll do multiple sets. And I thought it was weird for a while, and then I heard Louie Simmons saying that he does the same, where he'll drop the volume of the snatch. Sorry, he'll drop the volume of the powerlifting lifts, but he'll keep the volume of all the accessory work, because he says it's the accessory work that got you strong and keeps you strong. So why would you get rid of it the week before a competition? That kind of made a lot of sense to me. So I'm not going to give them like 120% snatch pulls for sets of 5, but I might give them 110% for a triple, just to keep some weight loaded. I know from experience, you might know this as well. Like, if I drop all the accessory work and it's just snatch, clean and jerk and the odd front squat, I just get weak. Like, I don't like it. I don't respond well. I like most of my best sessions come randomly in the middle of tough training. So if you can be smart enough to spot why that is and where it comes from and what you've done in advance, then you can do your best to taper the athlete perfectly.
No, we're gonna be quoting a lot of people, but I remember Glenn saying that like big PRs usually come in the middle of really tough training. The only reason someone would peak is to ensure consistency around those weights. It's not to try and hit a huge PR. It's just to make sure that when you come in, you know it's going to be there, instead of like randomly in week 3 you hit a big PR, week 4's down, week 5's up, week 6 is down. So it just ensures that consistency. And I kind of see that with what you were just saying about Louie. I feel like under a little bit of fatigue, I always move a bit better than when I'm completely fresh. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. But that makes a lot of sense. So now with accessory movements, how specific do you make those? And do you use those mostly to target weaknesses, or do you feel like there are certain accessory movements that kind of have to be done as weightlifters?
I mean, I think the accessory lifts that pretty much always have to be done are squats. It's so rare that I've never had an athlete that wouldn't benefit from squats. I think there's almost no athlete out there that wouldn't benefit from squats. So squats is an accessory that I would always put in. I give pulls to basically all of my athletes. But in terms of like beyond that, when we're looking at more accessory style lifts, I see them as still pretty core lifts. I mean, yeah, it's like I look at the athlete and I look at how they pull on a snatch or a clean, and I look at what's going wrong. Like, are they bringing their knees through too soon? Why is that? And if an athlete, as they pull, their knees come back, but then their knees come forward too soon, probably that means that they've got weak hamstrings or maybe a weak lower back, and so they bias loading the quads. The further forward your knees are, the more loaded the quads are going to be, and the further back they are, the more loaded the hamstrings will be. So if I have an athlete who can't keep their knees back and can't stay over the bar, then I'm going to program them things in high rep, hypertrophy kind of training, like glute ham raises or hip extensions. They're going to build those up. And then, it's the same, like you can almost, and again, this is Louie Simmons. I heard this from like a year or two ago again, but and this was his example, and this is specific to powerlifting. He would say, what makes a bench press go up? And he concluded stronger triceps. So you do close grip bench press to build up your triceps. But then he said, what makes a close grip bench press go up is tricep extensions. So you look at what builds something, and then you look at what builds that thing that builds the something. So, you'd look at, okay, this person can't keep their chest up off the floor in a clean, weak legs. And then you go and you put them in a squat, and you go, okay, this person, whenever they squat, their knees shoot back, they tip forward, and they're just good morning the way up. So they need to build the quads more. So then you give them an accessory like a belt squat. Not that I've ever given anyone that, but a belt squat or tempo front squats, where you actually control the weight at lighter loads for a 3 count down and a 3 count up, so you're not coming up as quick as you can. and you tell the athlete, keep your knees forward, don't let them shoot back. And then you build this one quality, you put it back into the squat, you put it back into the snatch or the clean, and you've built the lift. That's how I see it. I can't even remember what you asked me, in all honesty. I just remember that. I know that I've come to the end of whatever I was saying.
No, that's great. We were talking about accessory movements.
Oh, yeah.
So then in terms of rep ranges, does that kind of vary? I mean, obviously, for building muscle, it's going to take a good bit of volume. For building strength, less volume, more intensity. But how do you kind of differentiate between higher rep and lower rep? Because you said for tempo front squats, obviously you wouldn't do that for like a heavy single. So what are your thoughts on?
I suppose you could. I mean, I just never tried it. I've never tried it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then how would you go about like applying sets and reps to a program?
There are a few different types of periodization I've used to determine like sets and reps. I've tried a basic, I guess, Western periodization where it's 10s, 5s, 3s, peak, that kind of thing. I think that has merit, but it's like block A works into block B and block B works into block C, but block A has no relevance by the time you've got to block C and doesn't work into block C. So then I kind of looked into daily undulating periodization, which I'm sure most of you know listening, but basically you're doing heavy work and you're doing more higher rep, but you're kind of bringing in all qualities of a program all at the same time, but you can still periodize it. So you can do 10s and 5s and 5s and 3s and 5s and 1s or something like that. So you're still developing some level of hypertrophy whilst you're doing strength training. And then I tried a pendulum cycle where you just wave a 3-week pendulum of 75, 80, 85%. And that goes up and down and up and down. And I tried loads of different things, and I kind of, at the moment, I'm at a point where, I don't know if you're the same, where you look back at programs that you've done in the past and you can't think, you don't know why you did what you did, but you had such a good reason for it at the time. But I gradually build, I do it in 4-week cycles. I build the volumes generally over weeks 1, 2, and 3. And then on week 4, the volume drops and people go often for rep maxes. So the intensity might stay really high on week 4, but the volume might have dropped by like 60% or 70% even. And people are just attacking heavy weights. But I like to train all qualities at the same time as well. So like you said, when I'm working out volume, like I'll give the athlete, I don't want to take the athlete too far away from specificity on the snatch and clean and jerk. So I'll give them doubles or maybe hip snatches, but I'm never going to give them, I don't know, power snatch triples off blocks just because I don't know, it could work, but I don't program that kind of thing. And then I'll give them strength training with the squats. I never get too far away from 6s, I guess, 5s, 4s, that kind of thing, maybe 3s, occasionally 10s and 8s. But I will always maintain some sets of 10. So I'll always give them glute hams or pull-ups or dumbbell rows. A lot of the time, this accessory work has got to be to build unilateral or just to keep an athlete balanced. Like I gave a guy today Bulgarian split squats, which I've only ever programmed from an athlete once before, but he's had some issues with his lower back. His glutes are pretty weak, so I figured that's a good way to just balance him out. But I don't like to lose hypertrophy work. I like to keep that in almost all the way throughout a 12-week, 20-week, year-long cycle. I just might have more of it at certain times. Like I might have up to 5 sets of 10 on an exercise really far out. 5 sets of 10 bent over rows. Like it's a lot of work, but I might put it in there if we're really far out. But I'll never get away from a few sets of 10 a few times a week on a program.
Okay. So most of your overloading is done through increases in intensity from week to week. Do you ever find that you tend to add sets or? Yeah.
So the snatch and clean and jerk generally increases in intensity. The weight goes up and the volume goes down. And whilst that's happening, the volume in the lifts will increase. Mm-hmm. The weight necessarily might not. So at the moment, some of my athletes have got 3 sets of 8. Then next week is 4 sets of 8. And then 5 sets of 8. And then it's going to drop massively down to like 2 sets of 5 just to recover them. and that weight won't change over the 3, 4, or 5 sets. But then other meets, I might just keep it as 3 sets of 6, and then 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 6, but the weight goes up 5% each time. I think as long as there's some kind of progression that the athlete can see and that you're aware of, be it through an added amount of volume or an added amount of intensity, and you kind of have to determine that with your own lifter. Like some lifters, I just know some of my lifters, I can just keep adding volume and it does really well for them. And other people, it will kill them and they'd rather keep the volume down and periodize by increasing the intensity. So it just depends on the athlete. I mean, do you ever use like Prilipin's chart or anything like that?
I haven't. I actually feel like Prilipin's chart is a little, I feel like it doesn't take into consideration like the ability of most beginners to advance quickly. It kind of is like for more advanced athletes because they assume that you can only handle a small amount of work at such a high rep or such a high percentage.
Yeah.
But like we talked about with beginners, they can often progress from week to week to week. And if you're working off of one RM and you do that for 12 weeks, I mean, the beginner's going to beat that 1 rep max in like 3 weeks. It won't take 12. You don't need like this huge drawn out cycle for it, right? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I've used Prilipin's chart a lot. There were points where I was completely obsessed with it, where everything would fit into that chart. And now I still use it for snatches and clean and jerks. So for Prilipin's chart, again, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners know it, but it splits. If you're working at a certain intensity, a certain percentage of your 1 rep max, it gives you the optimal amount of reps and sets that will fit in it, and it gives you like the range. So generally, if you're working at 90% or above, the optimal number of reps or sets is like, I don't know, you want at most 10 reps with 90% or above. Or if you're working between 80 and 90%, it will be between 10 and 20 reps, 15 being optimal. If you're working between 70 and 80%, you want 12 to 24 reps with 18 being optimal. So I'll do this 3 or 4 week wave constantly in the snatch and clean and jerk, always during my programming. You know, other things fluctuate, but generally I'll have 75% week 1, 80% week 2, 85% week 3, and maybe up to 90% the week after. And I'll just know that I want to have 18 reps week 1, 15 reps week 2, 12 reps week 3, 8 or 6 reps week 4. And the sets will drop and the number of reps will drop each time. So I like to stick within that because I'm so aware that if you only give someone 2 doubles at 70%, it's not enough stimulus to cause any positive adaptation. And so much research has been done into the Prilipin's chart that I want to make sure that I'm sticking at least within it. And then again, I don't want to program 10 sets of 3 on the snatch. Like I think that's too much. It's too much work and it takes away from other things, and you're now above and beyond the optimal zone for that percentage. So I keep my lifts in there, but like you said, I think at least for strength work, it's almost too easy. The fact that if you're working at 70% or 75%, they think that 6 sets of 3 is okay to progress, or 4 sets of 4 at 75%, whereas it's just Maybe. I mean, the athletes they tested it on, there were hundreds of professional Soviet lifters who were on a lot of drugs, and probably 3 sets of 3 at 75% done most days was enough. But a lot of guys now, and a lot of girls can 5x5 80+%.
Oh yeah.
Or they can do 90% for 3 threes, or even more than that, maybe even 90% for a set of 5. Like that is for a natural athlete. The hardest thing that you or I or most of the listeners are going to face is the biggest quality that we need to improve on is strength. By far, like if you look at you have very nice technique. You look great when you lift. The difference between you and another 85 kilo lifter who's one of the best in the world is not technique. Like I say this pretty routinely, but if you had their technique, maybe you would lift another 3 kilos in the snatch, but you wouldn't lift 180 kilos in the snatch like they're doing. The biggest difference between you and them is entirely strength. And strength for a natural athlete is so hard to gain. You just have to push and grind and punch your head against this wall. I don't know if is that a phrase, punch your head against the wall? Who knows?
Well, you just
hit
made
your
it
head
one.
against the wall. Yeah, and you got to constantly do it with these weights where you're barely getting by a lot of the time. You're doing 5 sets of 5 and 6 sets of 4 and 4 sets of 4 at weights that are almost not doable, and then you have a few days recovery from the squats and you do it again. We can't get by with following Prilipin's chart necessarily for squats or for pulls.
Right. I think there's a lot there. I think one thing I wanted to touch on was kind of people being pigeonholed by weight progressions. You kind of alluded to it before. You said you take 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, then 5 sets of 10. I feel like people just, they instinctually think that they have to add weight to the bar every single week. And for smaller exercises, I mean, like a barbell row, if you're pretty topped out, I mean, the only way you're going to make progress is by adding volume through sets and reps. So I think using a combination and kind of hearing your thoughts on programming, it seems like you use a variety of methods, and I think that's what you develop over time. Is it's not just block periodization, it's not just daily undulating periodization. I'm going to use qualities from each different model and construct it to fit the athlete's needs and necessities. But there's always that underlying thread of let's get stronger and we're going to do whatever it takes, right? It's not like I feel tied to this certain method because this guy preaches about it and I worship that guy. You know, it's whatever works, what's effective. And sometimes people get caught up in that. Like, but like people get caught up. I don't necessarily care for Louie Simmons. He probably has a lot of good stuff to say. But like people hate Louie. But I mean, what if his methods work and you can incorporate them and use them to get stronger? You just have to be a little bit more open, and maybe that's a rant against becoming too dogmatic. But go ahead, Seb.
I mean, I think that, I mean, like you were saying, I use a bunch of different methods, really. I'm not like the DUP guy or the block periodization guy or the linear periodization. Like, the thing is, people have gotten strong doing all of these things. And I've realized that I think probably the most important quality or the most important thing to put in a program, I mean, you need some sort of progression, but step one, this is what I like, is that you look at the athlete and you look at what they're weak with. And you just look and you say, okay, this athlete is weak in this. Like, I have a bunch of lifters, but one of them is entirely different from the other. One of them's technique is just absurdly nice after how short an amount of time she's been lifting, and she needs to just get strong. And the other girl is reasonably strong, but technique isn't quite the same. So it would just be ridiculous. I'd be doing them a disservice to be giving them the same program. And if I could give both of them a really good DUP program that both have the same one, and exactly the same, they're doing the identical thing of each other, but they're gonna make okay gains. But if I just scrap all periodization and I just give them exercises that will correct their flaws and what they're not good at, they will be better just from doing that, regardless of whether it's cleverly periodized, just because they're doing things that are going to work on their weaknesses. So I think instead of worrying like I need to do 10s, 5s, 3s, it's like, no, if you've just done 10s or if you've just done 3s and you think actually I could do is spending some more time doing a few sets of 5 on this or on this because it's going to help my athlete, but I have to go back to 10s. It's like, no, don't be stupid. Like, if this is what the athlete needs, this is what the athlete needs. I mean, you've got people in China doing sets of 10 in accessory lifts every single day. You've got people in Russia doing sets of 4 and front squat, clean, push, jerk complexes. And then you've got people in Iran and Kazakhstan doing snatch, clean, jerk and front squat only. And everyone's doing all of these different programs, but everyone is focusing on what they need to focus on. And everyone is just trying hard. And so when people say there's only one way to do it, they're like, I'm the 5-3-1 guy. It's just like, what kind of an idiot are you? Like, how can you even say this and call yourself an educated, well-read coach when there are so many different methods that people use, so many that work? You just need to look at your athlete, what are they not good at? How can I improve that? And then program accordingly. And if you can put in some clever periodization, make sure you do it. But I think a lot of my periodization is just to make me feel happy. Like, I look at my programs, I think they're like so clever how this thing works into that thing, but the athlete has no idea and they actually don't care.
Right.
And it probably makes very little difference. It's like the icing on the cake, but you've got to give them the exercise that will help, and that's the eggs and flour and milk that will bake the cake.
Yeah,
I guess.
I agree completely. I think that people undervalue individual differences, and I know lifters that when they squat with higher reps, they get stronger. So I had a girl that squatted 215 pounds, or like roughly like 97 kilos for a set of 6, and her max at the time was like 102.
Wow.
Right? So if I started just programming in doubles and triples and stayed away from higher reps, I actually tried that and she didn't get as strong. So what does that tell me? She needs more volume at lower intensities, and we're just going to accumulate. And that's not for everyone. Obviously, people respond to triples differently than they respond to 10s, but there's a very small portion of the population on either extreme that's going to benefit from just singles or just sets of 10. And that's kind of where trial and error comes in. I mean, in reality, every athlete is an experiment, and you kind of just toss in a few variables, see what happens, pull a few out, see what happens, and you just manipulate it until you find what works, and then you just abuse that method as long as you can. And I think
absolutely.
elite athletes are the people that can do the same thing over and over and over again, and just put small amounts of weight on the bar every single week and be satisfied with that. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's being able to do the same stuff over and over again and not get demoralized if you don't see progress for a little while, and not get bored and not need to do exciting, flashy things. I think generally, you can do... I mean, I find, I have a girl at the moment who's really good. This is someone, I've not mentioned her before, but she's great, and she's been lifting a while, but she can now only commit to 3 training sessions a week. And she can only commit to an hour each time. So I've got 3 hours to coach her a week. So I was thinking, how can I get this girl better in 3 hours a week? And I realized that actually I can if I just cut out all the stuff that she doesn't need. Mm-hmm. So really, her technique's great because she's been lifting for a long time. So I'm only going to make her snatch twice a week. And she's only going to clean and jerk once a week because we just don't have time. Her technique is great. She needs to be strong. So she comes in, she's going to snatch off a deficit because her legs are weak. Then she's going to squat. She's going to do heavy pulls. And if she has time, she has glute hams. And then the next day, she's going to snatch, clean and jerk. This is all variations and stuff. Snatch, clean and jerk, pulls, and that's it. And then another day, she'll come in and she'll squat, clean deadlift, good mornings, and if she has time, she'll do something else. But these are almost just the meat and potatoes of the program. And if I could have her for 5 sessions a week for an hour and a half at a time, I'd add other things in. But I'm almost excited to see how well she progresses alongside my other girls who are training not full time, but like most athletes are able to, and see if she can maintain the same amount of progress, or maybe even surpass what they can do. I'd be interested to see that. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that's possible. I
definitely think it's going to be easier to know what's making her progress. Sometimes you have so much fluff in a program that you feel like if you pull one specific thing out, you won't know its impact. I have lat pull downs or some type of barbell row. If I take that out, am I going to get weaker or not progress as well?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just going down to the basics and then building from there. So I want to ask your thoughts. Just because you are I don't want to say Glenn is your mentor, but you guys have a pretty close relationship.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
And I know Glenn is a fan of using the full lifts. And you kind of just said that you use variations. I'm kind of curious why you use more variation in the snatch, clean, and jerk versus using the accessory movements like squats and pulls to focus on imbalances or technical faults.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny because I had the exact same mindset as Glenn to some extent before I was really a coach myself. I trained and I would write programs for some people sometimes, but generally I just thought, if you're going to snatch and clean and jerk, you should just snatch and clean and jerk. Maybe do some hangs, although I would just put them in there because I felt like the athlete would want some variety because I was inexperienced. I didn't really know. But generally, I would never program them weird variations. I'd just try and make them stronger through accessory work, through different squats and pulls and sets of 10 on the GHR and that kind of thing. And that made complete sense to me. Like, why would you do a no contact snatch when you can just go heavy and do a contact snatch? Until I started coaching athletes who were doing all these things that were incorrect. And it didn't matter how much I said, let's just get you strong. They would still do these little habits that are just, like, it's frustrating because I just thought, like, I can't get rid of these without focusing specifically on them. So this woman who, she hits the bar out when she makes contact in the snatch, giving her no contact snatches, it means that she's not able to overextend at the hip, because if she does and she leans back and her hips go forward, she's going to hit the bar. So she just has to invest mentally in the process of, how am I going to get this bar to go up without hitting into it? And she's learned how to do it by just finishing more up on her toes with a shrug more than back with her hips forward and whatnot. And then sometimes I might, she jumps back a little bit. So I'm giving her some no foot snatches, because then it's a humbling experience. It's like a push jerk where, if you did push jerks where your feet don't move, if you do it with 50 kilos, but the bar goes forward, you're just going to miss a 50 kilo jerk. And that's so embarrassing. And it's the same in the snatch. Like, if you can't move your feet and you're an athlete that jumps forward or jumps back a lot, then, jumping back's not too bad, but if you jump forward a lot and this time you can't move your feet, you're going to miss 30 kilos in the snatch, even if you're a 100 kilo snatcher. So giving things like that just quickly accelerate the progress in these little errors. Like, I can keep her getting strong. I'll never not give her a full snatch and a full clean in a week. I make sure that once a week she does a full snatch and she does a full clean and jerk. But she's doing a lot of work from the hip. She's doing a lot of no contact work. And it's extraordinary how well she's come on. Like, the first 2 months I had her, I was really worried. I did not know how to program for her. Like, she was getting so strong. She turned a 1 rep max into a 5 rep max in the back squat. But she didn't PR her snatch. She didn't PR her clean and jerk. And she was getting so upset. She'd get teary in training sessions. And I was just so stressed. So I just dropped the weight massively, gave her no contacts, that kind of stuff. And she's just killing it now. So I think, unlike Glenn, there's a lot of benefit to be had. But the thing is, Glenn is programming for, his online team, there's a bunch of people. So you can't give everyone no contact snatches because most people probably don't need them. So he's more certain that it's going to help these athletes by just giving them snatch. Because at the very least, everyone could do with more snatching. If he has, I'm sure if you, because you're on his personal programming, if you had an awful thing about jumping forward, maybe he'll give you some no-foot snatches. Like, I've seen him do that with Cal strength athletes before. So he's not opposed to it, but, this is the reason why he says he doesn't do, and this is because I spoke to him about it, he doesn't do, like, in the squat, he would never say 75% for 3 sets of 6 or 80% for 5 sets of 5, because for me, and I've said this before on the podcast, my 5x5, the best I can do is 82%. I tried 83% many times, and I could never do it for a 5x5, whereas he could do 90% for 5x5, and some of his athletes could. So if he programmed 85% 5x5, some athletes get a nice, easy workout, and I'm dying and I can't progress for another 5 weeks. But if he works off a percentage of a 5-rep max, so it's 90% of your 5RM for a 5x5, that's far more relative for everyone. Be it whether your 5RM is 90% or 95% or 85%, at least your 5x5 is going to be relatively difficult compared to just giving everyone a bland percentage. And I think if you've got a big online team like he does, I think that's it's a much better way of doing it. He can't program no contacts and specific percentage work.
I don't know why, but what you were saying resonates so much with me, and I guess it's because we kind of have the same views on programming.
Yeah, I think so.
And I had a lot of questions, and I had one really good one, and I kind of forgot what it was. But as far as like so the variations in the lift. So if you use a no contact snatch, are you ever worried that might interfere with her actual technique, like in a negative way, or like a variation might negatively affect how they lift?
I mean, the thing is, like, an athlete's not going to do a variation for 2 training sessions and it ruin their technique and they'll never be able to get it back. So at the very least, if you have a hunch that it's going to work, you might as well give it a try.
Yeah.
But then with something like the no contact snatch, she is always going to want to make too much contact, probably forever. So by her doing 1 training session a week where there's no contact, maybe 2, but she's still doing a normal snatch on the other week, on the other training session, then she's not going to forget how to make contact. It's just teaching her a better way to move her body. Like, it's not even the fact that we're getting rid of the contact. It's the fact that we're eliminating her hips from going too far forward when she extends.
Yeah.
We don't want her to extend with her shoulders going flying back. We want her to extend perfectly upright. Like, when I started lifting, and maybe when you started lifting, and I watched loads of John North, I thought that was how you lifted. Like, he's a great guy. Like, I like watching his videos. Or I used to love watching. I don't really watch him anymore, but I used to. But I've realized since that actually that's probably not the best way to lift. And when you watch these international lifters lift, they're so perfectly upright in the extension. And you see it in some American lifters like Colin Burns or Norik Vardanian. Their extension is so gorgeous. That's what I'm trying to get my athletes to do. And if you do no contact, that's what it gives you. So I don't have any fear that it's going to ruin her technique. And if it does, like, if I can see a technique get worse, I'll just stop doing it. Like, it's not that big a deal.
The only reason I bring that up is because I listened to Greg Everett and Ursula Garza's podcast, Weightlifting Life, and they were saying with athletes that are within 6 months of starting in the sport, you wouldn't program a no contact snatch or like a power because it would tend to interfere with their movement on the full snatch. So I was kind of curious your thoughts on that. Maybe it makes more sense for a power, because they're not learning to transition into the bottom of the full snatch.
I definitely wouldn't. I mean, I would never give an athlete powers within the first year of them training. Like, at least for a year. A lot of my CrossFitters who I coach, they power all the time. And they're never going to learn how to lift a substantial amount more than their power. It's like that's their go-to movement, which sucks, but it's just how they are. But I think teaching an athlete no contact from the start isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't do that. I do teach contact, but there was a guy who was the head weightlifting coach of, I want to say Sweden maybe. He was at the Eleiko factory, and he was coaching. I'm trying to think of a name. Christmas Abbott, some CrossFitter, and he was showing how he teaches a snatch, and he was just saying to her, "You're gonna pull the bar up. It's going to be completely straight. It's going to stay as close to you as possible. Don't make contact with it. And you're going to do sets of 5. And he just made her do it over and over again. And the bar path looked great. She looked smooth and quicker. And he just said, like, contact is the most difficult part of the lift to learn. First, you just want to learn how to pull the bar straight, accelerate the bar, and get under it. Don't worry about the bar snaking back and forward. Just pull it as straight as possible. And then you watch someone like Max Lang, and the bar path is just incredibly straight. So I don't think I would never get an athlete to do no foot early on and no foot snatch or anything like that, or like a close grip snatch. Like, what's the point of that? I don't even know if there's any point in a close grip snatch. Maybe there is, but like close grip snatches, no foot snatches, powers, those kind of, and no contact lifting.
Okay.
And I think maybe you only find that out once you start coaching.
Right. So kind of the last question I guess I have would be determining how many days a week someone should snatch and clean and jerk. So obviously you said it depends on time limitations, but could maybe you give us an example of someone that would benefit from 3 days of snatching, clean and jerking versus someone that would benefit from of 5 days, and then what the differences would be in the programs? Yeah.
So someone who's going to benefit from, I'm putting 3 days as not very often and 5 days as often. Someone who, wants to lift I wouldn't give myself 5 days a week. I see myself as relatively, I snatch and clean and jerk a high percentage of my back squat. I've been snatch and clean and jerking for nearly 5 years. Yeah, I've had injuries which have put me out, but I'm not going to forget how to snatch and clean and jerk. And just snatching and clean and jerk isn't necessarily going to get me strong right now. I just need to be a stronger person. So I would only make myself, and at the moment I only snatch and clean and jerk jerk 3 times. But the volume isn't going to be, it's not going to be extraordinarily high because I'm not doing it so much, I suppose, for technique. Like it helps with my technique. I don't lose it. You don't want to drop it completely, otherwise you're going to find it hard to bring it back in a few months. But I'm not doing it to make myself a huge amount better. I don't believe that if I started snatching 5 times a week that I would PR sooner. I really don't believe that. And I think probably with you, I wouldn't believe that either. If I just from seeing how you lift, I don't think making you snatch and clean and jerk 5-6 times a week will make you PR sooner. Mm-hmm. But if you've got someone who, someone who's a beginner, I'm going to make them. I mean, they might only train 3 days a week, but I'm going to make them snatch and clean and jerk every single session, because that's a skill that they're lagging in hugely. Like before you get an athlete squatting 200 kilos, you want to make sure that they snatch and clean and jerk a high percentage of their back squat, and they're at the very least efficient. So, I mean, it's funny. Like you and I are in a bizarre position right now, where when you start, you want to snatch and clean jerk frequently. You get to our point, and you need to get really, really strong. And then you look at the top athletes in the world who are not even working necessarily that hard on gaining strength so much anymore. They're just snatching, clean and jerking again all the time because their strength is as good as they're going to be able to make it. Mm-hmm. And they're just refining their technique as much as possible. But like I said, I mean, in terms of volume, I will never exceed. The most I ever programmed was 24 singles at 70% in the snatch and clean and jerk. And that was on an EMOM. But I never really go more than 16 snatches or 16 clean and jerks in a session. And I would never go less than probably 8 snatches or 8 clean and jerks in a session. And I just find where the athlete fits in there and, do it like that.
Awesome. Well, Seb, your wealth of knowledge for being like a relatively unknown coach. I know a lot of people know you for Weightlifting House, but so do you take like, I'm just assuming anyone would want to reach out. Do you take like online clients or anything?
Yeah, I do actually have quite a few. The thing is, I as much as I love Weightlifting House and I want to grow that, I only really started Weightlifting House so that I would be able to fund one day opening up my own gym so that all I could do full time is coach and pay athletes. Like all I want to do is coach. Like as much as I want to have a business, it's almost like a means to an end. Mm-hmm. Like my lifetime goal is to be the best coach in the world. Like that's what I want to be. Like I know I'm not going to be the best weightlifter in the world. I thought I could be for a while, and then I saw someone called Harrison Maris, clean jerk 200 kilos. I mean, it was before that, but like I realized like I can be a good weightlifter, but I'm not going to be the best in the world. But I really don't see any reason why I can't be the best coach in the world. Mm-hmm. Not to say I will be, but there's certainly nothing in my way. And the same way, there's nothing in your way to stop you from being the best coach in the world. You're not restricted by genetics in coaching. Like you can put in the time and read enough and just coach enough athletes that it's on you as to whether you're going to be the best in the world. Mm-hmm. And so to set myself up for that, I have to be in a place where I can fully fund coaching the top athletes all the time. So that's why I started Weightlifting House, to eventually be able to do that. But so, I mean, if you want coaching, like let me know, because I love doing it and I offer it and I coach a bunch of people online. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but like we do well. We make a lot of progress. I think this podcast is kind of an ode to your abilities. I mean, it sounds like you have a great idea of what's going on and how to program for different situations and scenarios. And I think that's what a really good coach can do, is they can take someone that's in a unique spot and work the program to them and not try and work them to the program. Exactly.
So maybe
you have to mold an athlete.
Exactly. So maybe if
mold a program. I got that mixed up. I got to mold the program.
No, it's fine. Do you have like an email that people can reach out to you at in case they are curious?
Yeah. The easiest one is, and this is going to make me sound official because I got my own Weightlifting House email address now. It's just contact@weightliftinghouse.com. That's a lot easier than Seb Ostrowicz at Gmail, because no one's going to be able to spell that. So yeah, contact@weightliftinghouse.com, and I'll get back to you within a few hours. I'm always working, so I'll get back to you.
And then
Yeah.
maybe if you can give us an idea of where everyone can find you, and if you have any projects that you're working on. You said you released an article. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have a lot of stuff on your site. So if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, on the site, I do have a lot of articles. I mean, because you've written for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think those articles that you wrote are probably the best researched articles. I think the ones that you've written have had the most amount of time go into them, which is why I think they're so great. So if you do want to read, those are the principles of strength training, basically. The principles of program writing were written by you, and they're up on the site, so they're a great read. My articles generally are more, I go and I sit in a coffee shop basically every day at the moment, and I take my laptop and I do as much emailing and Weightlifting House work as I can. And if something strikes me as an interesting topic, then I'll just sit down and write it, and I'll put it up on the website. I recently spoke with Barbend, and I'm going to start contributing to their site, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to write there. But I mean, my stuff is just my thoughts on weightlifting. Like, I was driving to the gym the other day, and I got myself in a real rant. I was getting angry because I was thinking people are always saying catch things on the heels, and I was just thinking to myself, I know that's wrong. Mm-hmm. And I know it's wrong, but I was trying to think, why is it wrong? And then I thought to myself, catching something on your heels is very similar to catching something on your toes. Like, it's one of the two ends. They're both the extremes. If you catch something on your toes, you're likely to lose it forward. If you catch something right back in your heels, you're likely to lose it backwards. You want to catch it in the midfoot so that if the bar is forward or backwards, you can rock forward or backwards to save the lift. So then I think about that, and then I'll just write, I'll spend half an hour and write 1,000 words on it and that kind of thing. But yeah, follow me anywhere. Anything that's Weightlifting House on any social media is where I'll be.
Yeah, I notice I typically have most of my rants after I'm done training, and I'm really fired up, and I'll just sit in the car on the way home and just go off about so many things. I think I think that's one of the reasons I started the podcast, is kind of just provide quality information. And I particularly like this episode because it was more of a discussion. Usually I'm interviewing and kind of trying to get people to talk about themselves or their ideas or their thoughts. But I think this was an excellent opportunity to kind of both of us voice our opinions and kind of see where they meet.
Sure. We should do one at some point where it's most overrated phrases or cues that you hear in a gym. Yeah. And we'll say them, and then and then instead of just coming across really angry people, we'll explain why. So the whole thing about heels, heels, you hear that all the time. I'm not just saying it to be controversial, but we could sit down, bring these up, and explain why they're not necessarily right, or why you need to be aware of the context of when these cues are given. Right. You give one athlete a cue, and you give, I've told an athlete before, try and jump forward. If my other athletes heard me say that, they'd be like, what the hell, man? You told me not to do that. It's yeah, but this person jumps back about a meter. If I tell them to jump forward, probably their weight will be in the right place on the foot, and they'll end up in the normal spot. So I think that could be a fun episode at some point. Just shit you hear in the gym, which needs to stop.
That's great. I definitely would love to have you back on sometime. And just to give you guys, the listeners, an idea of what's coming up. Well, this will be released after it, but I'm releasing an episode with Greg Everett, and hopefully I can have on a few more big names coming up. And Seb, you have your own podcast. You mentioned it. It's all Weightlifting House. The barbells, everything on the site, the T-shirts. So do you take pre-orders for the T-shirts, or are they just kind of when you put it up, you can order it?
I did for the first batch of the YB normal T-shirts. These ones I just ordered. I've only ordered 75 because I've not got, I'm not made of money at this point in my life. So I ordered them. I assume they'll all go relatively quick. Hopefully, who knows? Maybe I'll just be left with them, and only my mum will buy one. But I think they'll go. But the bars is what I'm most excited about. So if you are after a barbell and you live in either Europe or the USA, you'll be able to buy one of these. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to do a 10-second plug. They're 5 needle bearings. They're chrome finish, IWF nail markings. They're really nice. They're very similar, I suppose, to the more rogue Eleiko styles. But like I've said before, because I don't have to pay hundreds of employees, they are cheaper. So they're more affordable because, it's only me that I have to make a living, and I don't need to make much of a living at all.
That's what I was going to ask is what are they comparable to? Because like I hear those specs and I'm like, I have no idea how that translates to a bar. So would you say, I know it's definitely a lot cheaper than the Rogue and Eleiko bars. So you say it kind of like matches the Rogue quality.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people have trained on a Pendlay bar before. They're nicer than a Pendlay, and probably just a little bit below an Eleiko. I mean, that's kind of where they fit. Yeah, I mean, I made sure that they were a great bar, then sent one to Glenn so he could try it out, and Glenn loved it. And I think Glenn's actually thinking about maybe purchasing some of those bars as well because he liked them so much. But they're a great bar. And I mean, like that's the thing. If you are a Eleiko or you're Rogue, you have to charge more because you have so many people to pay. But then also, like the name Rogue or the name Eleiko means so much, and I understand that. Like Eleiko deserve it because for decades they've provided such amazing bars. So the guarantee you get with an Eleiko bar is huge, and that's why people pay a lot of money for it. But you know, you'd be amazed if you knew the amount of profit that someone like Eleiko makes on a bar. It's absurd. Whereas, you know, like I'm just a guy who lives at home who's trying to build up a business, and I'm not driven by money in the same way. So I don't know. I've made it more affordable. I was going to call it the People's Bar because I thought that worked well, and then Glenn pointed out that it made it sound a bit communisty. So I've gone off that. I've gone off that for now. But
so what's the difference? Is there, if there is one, between Glenn's bars that he's selling in the U.S. and yours? Are they just different locations?
No, I mean they're different manufacturers. He's selling a competition bar and a training bar. So his training bar is going to be like really cheap. I think that's going to be like $250, like super cheap.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, obviously, again, that because of that, the quality is not going to be quite as high. And then he's selling a competition bar that's going to be, as I'm not trained in it, but as far as I know, really amazing. I think that's pretty much a Eleiko competition caliber. And mine is in between. It's like it's a very, very nice training bar. You could almost call it a competition bar. So mine's going to sit somewhere in the middle price-wise. But, you know, if you're in the USA or Europe, you'll be able to pick one of those up by May, basically. Early May, late April, yeah.
What, I guess this is more for my curiosity. What does the shipping look like to the US? Is it going to be much, how much do you think it's going to run?
Well, so I'm because, I mean, it's ridiculous. People can't order something from Britain and send a barbell over to America. It's going to cost too much with taxes and everything. So I'm having a whole batch made and sent to the USA and then stored in the USA. And I'll obviously pay for all of that. And then people will just do as you normally would buy from somewhere. So it'll be, you know, $20-$30 to ship it. It's not going to be much at all. It's just like buying something from the USA already.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've thought about these things. I'm trying to get all business minded, but I'm doing my best.
Well, you're doing a great job, and Seb, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. And
thank you for having me. I always have a great time.
Yeah, it's a blast, and I kind of we had the idea of just making the show about training, but I thought just having a rolling discussion where we kind of cover everything from. Well, you listen to it. You guys know what we talked about. If you made it this far, So I want to thanks again for you guys for listening. If you liked it, go like, share, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Leave a review, positive or negative.
Do that.
I say people that every episode, but no one leaves a review.
I know. I get that. I said it a couple times. No one did anything about it. So I just don't say it anymore.
Yeah, maybe we need to incentivize.
But it's worth it. Like if you're listening, give a review. We could review each other's podcasts.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to be honest. So, but anyways.
Don't be too brutal.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing, I keep getting caught up, but one thing you do is you have a news show and you give shout outs to kind of like the everyday lifters. And I think that's awesome. I think the people listening will kind of appreciate that because we're all training just as much as everyone else, and it kind of gives us some notoriety. So go check out the news show and check out some good lifting, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to be featured in the news show, it's like a little segment at the end. Just put your video on Instagram as you normally would and do the hashtag Weightlifting House, and I'll find it. And then if you've put enough effort and passion into that lift, then I'll talk about you on the podcast. That's how I do it.
Awesome. And this is episode 23. Thanks again, guys. I guess we'll catch you next time.